Aloha. Get situated here. Thank you again for coming back-to-back days. I appreciate that. It's just a lot going on here as we get toward the end of the year. So first I'm going to speak about Maui. We're going to have an update, and the slides are meant to actually kind of go along with this update. So this is our update, really a status report on our recovery efforts. So let's advance to the next slide. Okay, so the first thing we're going to really talk about is the housing situation. I spent time, of course, with Mayor Bisson. I want to thank him for his incredible hard work and his team's hard work. They are, they're really trying to care for people, and it is hard in the wake of the fire. It's been, over 4 months now. So we're going to talk about phase one of housing. Then we're going to talk a little bit about, as you can see, the One Ohana initiative, which is the recovery fund. And then we're going to talk about our new representative and our new senator. Also, I want to recognize Speaker. Thank you, Speaker, for being so supportive of these folks. Okay, so next slide, please. So as you know, we need to house people. At our peak after the wildfire, so 12,000 individuals were displaced in Lahaina. And within 14 days, 7,996 people ended up in hotel rooms. And many of those individuals are still in hotel rooms because we just don't want anyone to be homeless. And long term, as you know, we're going to rebuild housing for people. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of resource, and a lot of time. So when we peaked at 7,996 in hotels, we knew that gradually we'd have to get people to a place that was just better for them, better living circumstance. So what we need to do right now, the only housing that's truly available, is short-term rentals. So phase one, as you can see from this slide, is to engage 3,000 short-term rentals, move them over into a long-term rental position, and help individuals be there for 2 years while we build Ohana units, like ADUs, while we build transitional housing, while we build actually permanent housing. So how do we do that? How do we get 3,000 short-term rentals to convert to long-term rentals? Well, it's not easy because many of them had bookings. Also, the amount of money that people pay for short-term rentals is extraordinary as opposed to what people actually get for regular rent. And this, if I may, is simply a problem. It's a problem that has to be fixed. But in the aftermath of a tragedy, it's not something you can just snap your fingers and fix. So a couple things are happening. One, today, there's the second reading on a bill over at the County Council on Maui. They have proposed, with the mayor behind it, they've proposed to give people tax relief, to give them property tax relief so that for a period of time, I believe it starts at 18 months, they won't have to pay any property taxes. And that could help people to the tune of thousands of dollars per month be able to afford to convert over to long-term rentals. Also, and this is very important, we're going to be offering fair market value offers to the people that are right now renting out their properties as short-term rentals. This is with support of FEMA. This will be support of the state. Is it expensive? Yes, it is. Is it necessary? Well, in the short term, it is also necessary because leaving people in hotels, and as of yesterday, it was 6,297 people still in hotels. It's extremely expensive, and it's difficult to live that way for much longer. So we're making incremental moves to get people into better living situations so that we can ultimately restore normal life. So that's what that looks like. So phase two, after getting people into long-term rentals, is to then build thousands of ADUs, also to build transitional housing units. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Now, the long term is to build housing developments. That has to be with the blessing of the county council, the people of Maui. We can do transitional housing, but there are always water concerns. That is an ongoing challenge. That's probably the largest challenge that we have to simply putting up housing. So I hope people understand that. I also want to talk a little bit more about short-term rentals. Let's go to the next slide. So currently on Maui, so people have perspective, there's 2,500 to 3,000 timeshares at any given time. Now people book them, they own them, and so on. They're units that people can live in, but they are timeshares right now. There's also between 12,000 and 14,000 short-term rentals, depending on how you count it. So just with those numbers alone, that's before you consider illegal short-term rentals. You have between 14,500 and 17,000 homes that are only available in the short-term market. And is that possible for people to rent? No. Right now, the average amount of money that people get from short-term rentals is 352% of the base rent that people would pay. So let me break that out for people a little bit. If House A is renting to a local family for $5,000, it's a 3 or 4 bedroom house, they're paying $5,000, maybe they're sharing it with family, that's their rental. That's for a local family. House B is next door, but it's a short-term rental. They're getting on average 352% of this. So they're getting over $17,000 a month in revenues. And that's just not consistent with what we can do as a society. So the mayor's plan, tax break, so we move some people over. We put some money in, hopefully find a reasonable price point, which is what we're offering, and then get out of this mess over time. And it's going to be very necessary because the Lahaina population, as I shared, was somewhere between 12,000 and 12,900 people that were displaced. So in my opinion, we have to convert a lot of short-term rentals. So let's look at that. The next slide. I told you it's over a 2-year period. We intend to rent 3,000 units, and 2,000 of those units basically will go to the FEMA eligible individuals. These are people who were already renting, who were working, who are citizens, our local families. Then there's another 1,000 families that were COFA migrants, that might have been undocumented workers. They were members of the community, but they didn't qualify. It's that 1,000 individuals that the state and philanthropists will help pay for. And we'll break out these numbers for people, but that's the universe of the challenge. And until we convert 3,000 units or get them into the market, we're going to really struggle, and people will still be in hotels. So over the course of the next couple weeks, you'll see a lot of movement. On Monday, this past Monday, FEMA, Bob Fenton, who's been a great partner, sent out 13,000 letters to short-term rentals all across the county, telling people we're here to basically offer you what you got paid in the previous year, and you're going to benefit presumably from this tax break. So there is no reason at all for people not to take this opportunity up, provided they want to be a helpful part of the solution. It will cost us resources that we have set aside in the budget, which we'll be going into deeper detail on Monday. It's necessary. It's necessary. So you'll see that. We'll see what happens over the course of this week. And also after January 1, we'll see exactly how many offers we have. We already are working with our Department of Human Services. We're working with CNHA. We're working with so many partners. Let's actually look at that next slide. The basic partnerships are County of Maui, of course. They're doing yeoman's work. State, Department of Human Services, I authorized essentially $40 million to both build and rent for those who are in that category of 1,000 people. And then FEMA, Hawaii Community Foundation, and their generosity, they've raised well over $100 million. Maui Economic Opportunity, Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, and the People's Fund. I was on the phone just this morning texting back and forth with The Rock. They've raised tens of millions of dollars. It's incredible what people are doing. But even so, we still have to get some of these short-term rentals, and that is absolutely fundamental to any solution we're going to have if we want to give people a dignified space to live in for these next 2 years as we build housing. So one more slide there, I believe, a shared arrangement, the logistics of this. There you can see it. We need 2,000 units, which FEMA pays 100% for. They have multiple mechanisms to do that. We come up with 1,000 units. We all pay fair market value to the best of our ability, and that's fair market value of what people got the previous year. We're being very generous, and I understand this could cause a ripple effect that people are worried about in their regular rentals, but this is an emergency. We are going to continue our prohibition on evictions, and the Attorney General is going to be very serious about that. So people should not get the idea for 1 second that they can evict some nice family that's been paying $3,500 rent and then suddenly enter this program. That's not how this is going to work. It won't be easy, but people have to be thoughtful and kind. The transition gradually has to be away from short-term rentals to a large degree. And then, of course, I mentioned the cost share and philanthropy. Had very, very good discussions with Hawaii Community Foundation, and they, of course, are generous to an extreme. They will support this program. Finally, the cost. The cost is going to be dependent on our total home engagements, how many homes we get. And I will say this, as we build houses, as we build ohanas, we'll be able to let people move into their permanent housing. And that's very important because over time, that's the right thing to do. Even sharing the cost on short-term rentals, even though it's a lot less expensive than hotels, it's still costly, and we're mindful of that. It's better that we solve this housing crisis and actually build homes. In the coming years, of course, we're going to have a lot of support from HUD. That's going to be a consideration all the way. Now, here's the consideration for the owners. The next slide. Fair market value, like I said, was up to 352% compared to previous years. And I'm hopeful people will come in and offer their properties for significantly less. It's important. This is very important. With the waiver of property taxes, they should be able to be generous. But I do want to be blunt here. If we don't get people stepping up, I'm going to drop the hammer on short-term rentals that aren't able to be used for our people. It's just not okay that we don't have housing for our local people. And so I will propose a moratorium on short-term rentals through emergency rules. I'm sure we will face litigation, but I will do it if we don't get 3,000 units for our people who have been living in hotels, because it's not civilized to make people wait to get housing after they've lost their home in a fire. That may be viewed as fairly controversial, not from the perspective of someone who's got a family of 5, 6 people and they've been living in a hotel room. They need to be helped. So I'll do that if necessary. Okay, so that was the first thing I wanted to share. I'm sure there are going to be questions. We'll do it at the end if you don't mind. Next, let's go to the next slide. So the One Ohana Initiative. Let's bring our families together. You guys know what I'm talking about. So phase 1, the Maui Recovery Fund. Now, the Maui Recovery Fund is meant to do really one thing. It's helped to alleviate the suffering that has occurred for families that have lost a loved one or who have been hurt by the fire, physically injured. We now have $162.5 million committed, and these funds will be distributed for those who choose it, 1,000% optional. For those who choose this path, we will compensate them through just an agreement so that they don't have to wait for lawsuits. It would be approximately $1.5 million per victim that lost their lives to go to the family. There should be extremely low, if not no, legal fees for them to face, because it's going to simply be a validation that they lost a loved one, and then we'll make that money available to them. And I'm having ongoing meetings with families. I was there last week in a touching 3-hour session where people did share both their housing concerns and, of course, what they went through when they lost their mom or their sister or their uncle or a child. I'm also going to be there tomorrow for 3 hours to be with families. I'm going to keep doing this until people understand just what's available. And it is totally okay if a family chooses not to take this offer. Whatever, as I've shared with the families themselves, whatever they choose is right. It's that simple. It's not what is offered, it's what they choose. If they want to do a settlement for this part of their loss, that's good for them. If they don't, it's okay. The reasons, why do you do this kind of thing? Well, there are several reasons. One, we will start this process formally on February 1st, and in the course of 3 to 4 months, people would get the $1.5 million per lost loved one. They wouldn't have to wait to go through lawsuits, and they won't have to hire attorneys, except maybe to help them with the paperwork, which we'll also have pro bono attorneys available. I would much prefer that people, if this fits their life, go this way, because they won't wait 3 or 4 years in court. They won't potentially have 30 or 40% of whatever settlements they have spent on the settlement fees that go to the legal community. And I'm not trying to be mean-spirited about lawyers. I'm trying to say that families who have suffered in Hawaii should get the resource. If they're going to get a much better deal long-term, they should take it. I mean, that's fine. But I want to make sure people have a chance to heal sooner, and they'll be able to get the settlement wrapped up really quickly. The next slide tells you a little bit more. There's some details I think people find interesting. Our fund administrator, with great support, will be retired Judge Ron Ibarra. He's offered to do services pro bono. Ron was a judge on the Big Island for many years. He retired a year ago. Extraordinary individual. The directors of protocol, which we've already written, could share with people in the coming weeks, are Ken Feinberg and Camille Byros. And Ken Feinberg is a legend in the legal community on these kind of matters. He handled the 9/11 fund, also working pro bono. The administrative support will be offered by First Hawaiian Bank, and the initial fund contributors to date are the state of Hawaii with our commitment, Maui County, HECO, Kamehameha Schools, and we were pleased to be joined by Hawaiian Telcom yesterday afternoon. There are some others that may join ultimately. There have been discussions with other parties. I'll wait to name them as they decide whether they want to be a part of this or not, because if someone does choose this relief fund, this recovery fund, the deal will be they'll sign a release from litigation. Again, only if it suits the families as they go through this process. So those were the main things I wanted to share on the fund. Please keep in mind that it could take a really long time for people to go through the process of healing, and then there's going to have to be settlements on loss of land, loss of business. So my overall approach is to help us heal as a state. So as we clear out the land and the debris, which goes in the next 6 to 9 months, we also will help people if they choose to settle. And from that point on, we can turn our focus to rebuilding. There's already been some promising information, though there are toxins in the ash in Lahaina. They were far less severe than they were up country. I know it sounded like a pretty scary report from the Department of Health, and we have to be thoughtful about that. But the levels of arsenic, for example, up country were very high. They were not nearly as high, and that should be something that can be remedied by the Army Corps of Engineers pretty quickly. There's still other questions out there, but in 6 to 9 months, when we've removed debris, when people have given right of entry, I think that the mayor is going to very strongly consider giving permits quickly to the 561 families at least that were both owners and occupiers of their property. And then perhaps he'll go through a process to expedite other permits so that when people choose how to rebuild Lahaina, they can. In the meanwhile, I'm going to try to get them relief so they have some resources. Okay, so that's what I had on that fund. And now I get to kind of the, I guess, the more fun part of this, because that all sounded quite harsh, as people have been struggling, and that's to announce my next state representative colleague. And so I'm just really excited to announce right now, and come up with me, Tyson Miyake, who is succeeding Troy Hashimoto, who served very passionately and as a terrific state representative who elevated to the state senate here in I should say moved, not elevated. Forgive me, Speaker. Yes, moved, replaced. As Speaker says, downgraded. So we'll let that play out. But we are just, we love our Speaker, and then to have a new colleague for him in Troy, in Tyson is special. A couple words about why we chose Tyson. 3 great options this time, as we've had before. Tyson, great person, educated in Maui, then ultimately went to the mainland for college, and he's done a business degree. He knows about construction. He knows about building. His family's been prominent in that industry. That's one thing that was terrific about him. 2, during the COVID crisis, Tyson served in an extraordinary way. He was one of our go-to people, and I can attest to that because I was calling him on many occasions and speaking with their team. He was terrific during COVID as he worked in the previous mayor's administration, Mayor Victorino. So he came very well recommended. He has relationships already throughout the legislature, so he'll be able to hit the ground running. And in many ways, he and Troy are going to be 2 of the foundational leaders, I'm sure, this legislative session, as much of what we talk about is going to be focused on Maui's recovery. So without further ado, I thought what I would do is call also up, if I may, Troy. He might say a word or 2 about Tyson, and then we'll let Tyson tell you a little bit about himself.
Thanks so much, Governor, and it's great to be here to share in a special day for a friend. I remember when I got appointed back in 2018, and you never forget that day. And so I wanted to be here for Rep. Miyake and make sure that he is able to start off right. I think I first want to thank the governor because he moved through this process very expeditiously to make sure that Maui had representation both in the Senate and now in the House, especially as we gear up for this very, very critical legislative session. So I look forward to having a great partner. I've known Tyson for many, many years. He'll be a great addition to the Maui delegation. And I think, as I said before, we have a lot of work ahead of us, and I think all of us are going to have to be lifting the work ahead of us for all of Maui. So thanks, Governor, for this great pick, and welcome Tyson to the legislature.
Good morning, aloha. I'm humbled and honored to be selected to serve. I want to thank Governor Green. I look forward to working with Governor, Speaker Saiki, and my new colleagues in the legislature to move Hawaii forward and most especially rebuild a resilient Maui. Thank you.
Alrighty, so at this point, we'll move into media Q&A, and I think I'm going to start with Chad.
Well, hi, thank you very much.
Oh, hi, good morning, Chad.
Thank you. Governor, the speakers here today, I know you have a lot on your plate, but this is related. The House released its final report, the interim working groups, obviously about Maui and so forth. Have you had a chance at all to look at it or think about it, given that it definitely clicks with the stuff that you're working on?
So the question is around, has Governor reviewed the House committee report?
So thank you. I've had periodic updates from the members, but I haven't seen the final report yet. But by all indications, first of all, they've done extraordinary work quickly, got together a lot, and we all seem to be on the same page that significant relief is going to be necessary for Maui this session, and actually a move toward resiliency. I know people use that word quite a lot, but clearly in context, we have to be better now with a resilient state. So, I will follow the House's lead, as we tend to do when they bring in financial recommendations at the outset of the session. I assume we're going to have very good buy-in from the Senate, too. It's quite interesting, actually, to have the House and Senate member from Maui here with us right now. New in their own ways, although, of course, Troy was already in the body. So we'll review that report in the next 10 days. On Monday, we will give you an update on some of the things that are in the budget, and my understanding is Blake Oshiro, who does a lot of our legislative work, has been interfacing with the House. You bet.
Real quickly, Representative, how old are you? 41. Thank you.
It's a very young 41, though.
So for those joining in the live stream, Chad had a follow-up as to how old how young Representative Tyson Miyake is. I'm not going to tell you, or should I? 41 was his answer. We'll move to Daryl with Hawaii News Now.
Governor, to clarify the amount of money that's, just for your benefit, I'm going to ask about the amount of money that these STRs are going to be costing, because there's a number of different explanations. I want to get it nailed down.
Okay, we could also, you want to, okay,
Question on that.
go for it.
Governor, when you say that the federal government is going to pay is offering the amount that someone made last year, that's specific to their tax reports and all that they have to make, as opposed to the big button numbers that were put out earlier, the 5, 7, 9, 11 numbers. Yes. So what I want to get clear is, what are we going to be paying for these SDRs? Is it, in all cases, exactly what they paid the prior year?
So Daryl is seeking clarification on the dollar amount that we're going to be paying for these STRs.
Yes, okay, so good. I appreciate the question. So for clarification, again, there's kind of two subsets of what we're paying for the short-term rentals. On the federal side, they are going to take responsibility for what they already are committed to, which is individuals who qualify in all ways. Citizens, they've been working here, they lived in the area. That's very important because some people were getting benefits and we found later that they had a second house or that they didn't actually live in Lahaina. So that's getting sorted. So our universe of families is a little smaller than original. So there's that program that they're doing, and I'll break out these numbers, and then there's the program that DHS is doing. In order to try to simplify and get the ball rolling, we went for average amounts that people were getting for a efficiency or a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, and a 4-bedroom. That's where the numbers were essentially like 5,000, 7,000, 9,000, 11,000 for some large houses. It turns out, and I did think to print this report, so it turns out that the average, the median on the state side, the Department of Human Services side, for units was, here's the magic number, I believe, it was $6,341 per month. That was the average through the Department of Human Services program that they've launched. So that's also called the Rental Assistance Program, DHS RAP, Rental Assistance Program. So we're going to do what we can to get the average that they got the previous year, and we have a lot of records on that. And the negotiations that the federal guys are doing also is meant to do that. So it should come in, that's of course for the average based on this initial cohort that went in. The larger units of course cost more, but they can also house a lot more people. The reason again that this is a sensible investment from our perspective is, number one, people want to stay on Maui and have their lives, and two, the hotel room rates, as you know, and we're so thankful to the hotels who stepped into the program, the 40 hotels, are much higher. And so we were seeing costs as high as, once you added food and services, you know, $350, $400, $500 a day for some facilities, and that pencils out more than twice this cost. So we're finalizing these details. We'd like to do them in mass when we have an opportunity to get, if we can, say a whole building, or people who do a whole timeshare company will do that. If we get fortunate and get, say, extra help from Airbnb, which is what our human services team is doing, we'll go with a large number of units. We've asked them to waive any of the cancellation fees, which we can do under the emergency proclamation, because otherwise it's pretty high. And I know that a lot of people are having difficulty with this proposal because they already had individuals that had gone to contract to rent a short-term rental throughout the year. But at the end of the day, housing our local people is more important, and that's why we, instead of trying to undercut the market, which we felt would not be effective, we're just trying to make sure we get the housing up now. And the faster we then subsequently build, the more quickly we'll be able to get people into permanent houses.
Follow up on that. So,
I'll do it.
give us a general idea of how many people are coming, how many SDRs have come forward, and also moratorium issue on eviction issue.
Yes.
Your emergency order says that you can't evict someone for their failure to pay rent. So is it really illegal for these people to evict someone because they can get more rent from somebody else? I'm just wondering whether you have to tailor that order better.
Yeah.
And why wait on a moratorium? Why not just do it?
Yeah, a couple questions there. So, no, it's good. Yeah, it's good. So the first question is, can people? Well, let me ask both questions. You asked the question: is the eviction language strong enough, and does it address the full concern that someone should not be evicted for any reason in order to displace to a higher, paying opportunity? We may have to be, I guess, more clear about that. And that's probably coming on or around January 4th, when the emergency proclamation has to be upped again for 2 months. The other question about why not just do the moratorium right now, we're doing all that we can to be thoughtful about everyone. The individuals that, of course, were displaced are top of mind, but also we're mindful that there is an economy on Maui, and if I pull that trigger too quickly, it could create lawsuits that end up costing us 4 months, 6 months, a year in court, and I don't want to, I don't want to lose a battle in court. So I'm really, my approach, if you want to just know exactly what I'm thinking, is I want to give people this opportunity to come along, because it's only been a few dozen so far that came in willingly without any help. I'd have to also ask CNHA. I believe they've had some significant success. We have a lot of different people on the ground trying to make this happen. And the largest impetus to move, I believe, is going to first be the tax break, when people realize they can save themselves significant taxes. I will also tell you that taxes are going to go up on short-term rentals after the new year, once there's time to pass legislation to that effect, I believe, from the county side. That I've heard that, and I think that that's probably the right thing to do. So we're trying to ask people to work as partners. Interestingly, just like we ask people to be partners in the Maui Recovery Fund. We're not trying to force anyone to do things. We're trying to encourage people to adhere to the values that we have in Hawaii, which is that we care for one another.
Okay. Dan Nakaso with Honolulu Star Advertiser.
So similar to Daryl's question about timing, you're talking about 3,000 short-term rentals. Do you have a deadline in mind? And going back to what you referred to previously as the nuclear option, the moratorium, I think you called it the hammer today.
Yes.
Is that going to happen if you don't get 3,000 by a certain date in 2024?
So Dan's question is seeking clarity around a deadline or a timeline for the potential moratorium, or as the governor called it today, the hammer.
Okay, so the timing of the nuclear hammer is sometime in mid-January, if it's necessary. I was asked by leadership at FEMA and at the county to give them a little time through the new year to succeed. Obviously, the tax break hasn't even, I don't believe, been fully voted forward unless it happened in this last half hour. So we'll have news about that today, I think. Also, it's just there was so many people that had from years past already booked right through January 1. I thought rather than create chaos, we asked humbly for people to understand and stay at the hotels through the new year. That's why we worked very hard behind the scenes to kind of put the brakes on anyone moving people again from one hotel to the next. And then shortly after New Year's, I'll take whatever action is necessary, honestly, to get people into the program. I believe in people, and I believe in the generosity of most who have seen what's gone on in Lahaina and across the islands will offer their units. We do have a lot of units offered in other islands, but we really want to focus on Maui. In fact, even on West Maui, because mostly it's teachers and people with kids that are going to the schools. We're building a new school, as you know. We want people to have that option. So it's going to take a few weeks. We will get extensions if we have to, but February 10th is one of the fairly hard deadlines that exists with FEMA. That's when their full supported hotels, the non-conjugate sheltering, the hotel sheltering, technically begins to go away, and then the costs come more fully to the state. So we're motivated. We're motivated to get people mostly into a place where they have a kitchen and maybe a yard, and space for their keiki. But we're also motivated by the long term, because I want our dollars to be going towards permanent housing rather than recovery housing where we can.
Yes, go ahead, and he'll repeat the follow-up.
Yeah.
So, Governor, you generated a lot of news when we quoted you saying moratorium is a possibility. Did the letter from Bob, the FEMA letter to 13,000 owners, does it mention moratorium, or did it just talk about the tariff of the tax breaks and the high building apartments?
Well, thank you. So the question was, does the letter mention that? No, the letter focuses on the positive, which is an opportunity to get the tax break and to get this competitive rate, which is quite generous. But I think one of the purposes of having these press conferences, and to say it a few times, is that people need to know what's coming. And I don't want it to catch anyone by surprise. I don't even want to put too much of an onus. It's not a moral question on short-term rentals. It's simply a question of inventory. All across the state, we have a shortage of housing. All across the state, we have thousands and thousands of short-term rentals, and we can only build so fast. So we're going to have to take this issue up, and Bob is being very nice when he makes these offers, and the president's been very generous in support. But it's my job to kind of take the hard position if our people aren't being cared for. And so that's what's coming. And it's going to come swiftly in the new year if need be, because in talking to families, there's a lot of extreme stress. Some of the mental health challenges are a result of crowding in hotel rooms, and you can see it on their faces and you can hear it in their voices. So January is the month to get a lot of units for people, and I'm willing to go down any road that makes itself available. I even be willing, if I have the blessing of the legislature, to make acquisitions if they were fiscally sensible. But there's not a lot to acquire. It's not easy to do that. So I think that this transition from short-term rentals to long-term rentals, followed up by building Ohana units, which you're seeing a lot of those programs recommended, makes the most sense. We also want FEMA, in addition to our building, we want FEMA to build, and Senator Schatz and I have spent significant amounts of time talking about that. So we'd like FEMA to also do what they can to build transitional housing, because I think that the full rebuild is going to take well more than 2 years. It's probably going to take 5 to 10 years once you talk about all of the different families. And we can get into that, I guess, subsequent interviews and press conferences. For the next, 60 days, our focus is on getting short-term rentals to people in the form of 1 and 2 year leases.
Okay. Bryce, K212.
Thank you. If it does come to that moratorium point, will those owners still receive the benefits of the incentives that are being offered to them now?
Yeah, great question.
Okay, so the question is around if the moratorium comes to, will the owners still receive the benefits currently?
Yes.
Do you personally expect to reach that 3,000 number?
And does he expect to reach that 3,000 number?
So let's see, how do I say this? So yes, the moratorium would be very brief if possible. As soon as we reached 3,000 units, I would lift the moratorium, because I don't want to have any unnecessary fights. I'm sure I'll have plenty of necessary fights with Chad over the course of the next 2 months. But the unnecessary fights are fights over resources when we have it there. So people would still be able to jump into the program. They would be able to get the tax break. In the bill, if you read it carefully, there's a window of opportunity. If you go soon, if you go quickly into the mayor's plan and the county council's plan. I want to really thank the council and the mayor for being supportive of all these things, resources for those who lost a loved one, and these housing initiatives, which are very smart. They get a bigger benefit. So yeah, and the answer is, do I think that we'll get to 3,000 units? I suspect we will. The number I showed you on that slide, that 17,000 number, is actually a pretty significant underestimation of the number of units that actually exist on Maui. It's closer to 25,000 units that are, somehow tied up in short-term rental businesses. So we really only need to get about 10%, maybe 12% of all the available short-term units on Maui. But that tells you something. Just 10%, and we can help the people of Maui that were displaced. If we can gradually, with a longer runway, find ways through benefits and tax breaks and incentives to get people to move over to long-term rentals, we won't have the housing crisis that we currently have on Maui. That is now a significant part of our thinking every day. And I welcome input from the short-term rental community and, of course, the legislature. I assume they'll lead the way on this. We have to make this change. If we don't, we're going to continue to be a state that is unable to house our local people.
Go ahead.
End of those 2 years that they're staying, how many permanent homes do you expect to be built?
Great question. So my internal goal is 1,000 built by the state and the county, at least, and 1,000 transitional houses or units, if possible, from the feds. And then, of course, there's the constant movement to build housing just in general. For example, I would recommend that you look at Kali Watson, our DHHL chair's plans. I believe his number was well over 1,000 units that they have planned in the next 2 years, expansion on Maui. Keep in mind, though, those, of course, are for the Hawaiian community. But also, we may very well, because it's already allowed, to build a lot of ADUs, or the Ohana units, on people's properties. And that will help, because if you look at the profile of individuals that were renting in Lahaina, there were some large families, and then there were just a lot of people that were single individuals or couples, young people that were renting, and renting on a side property, renting amazingly out of a garage unit, renting in a house that really shouldn't have accommodated so many people, and that will really be helped by having ADUs.
Okay. KITV, Kristen Concilio.
Okay, so today was supposed to be the deadline, and I know it got, for people to move out of hotels, it got pushed back to the new year. Is February 10th the new deadline, or what's the new deadline on how long people can stay in hotels?
So the question is seeking clarity around the new deadline for transitional housing from hotels to longer term.
Well, thank you for that. Our goal is to extend as long as necessary to get people into long-term housing. It really becomes a matter of who's paying for it. And we can't let people become homeless. So there are lots of options that we have. Each one is a different circumstance for people. There are the hotels there. There are also the 1,400 units that we have statewide through HHFDC, but 800 of them are on different islands, and I think it's only fair to have people who want to stay on Maui, and that's most people, do that. And then there's all these other programs. So we do have lots of options for people, but it's really January. It's the month of January where we don't expect to have mass evictions of any kind from our program that's currently in place. We really don't want anyone to have to move, if at all possible, again. We'd like people to stay through the month of January until they can move into the now long-term rentals. There is a lot of action going on right now because of the piece of legislation and because of the obvious action I'll have to take in the new year. So I think this is going to be the right month to do it. People asked also, why didn't we do it in, say, November? It's very hard to move one entire industry off of their model and their policy position that quickly. It's difficult. My hope has been that people would voluntarily do it, and I think what you're going to see, the holiday market, it spikes and peaks, as you know, and we're sharing hotels between survivors and visitors in the first week of January, and then it gets quite quiet, so there's a lot less pressure in the month of January. The pressure is now on us to care for people, as it always has been. We also did something for the homeless community. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention we immediately got shelter for about 160 individuals that were homeless. So we're trying to take care of everybody, but it's a big lift when you're dealing with this many people.
Sorry, just to clarify.
Yeah.
So if you want 3,000 conversions to long-term housing, so we have more than 6,000 families in hotels, so the other half of those go to where?
No, we have about 3,000 family units right now that are in hotels still. So we peaked at 8,000 people. The average family size was like 2.08 people per family unit that were displaced. So there's lots of families of 3 and 4. There are also lots of individuals. We look at family units because that's what we'll need to get into the inventory for us. So we are now, I think I shared the number, it was 6,297 people, which is more or less 3,000 families that need to be housed. Sure.
We're going to do final 2 questions, so I'm going to go Audrey, and then I'll end here.
Governor, have you met any people who own the short-term rentals or talked to them? And what do they want?
So the question is around, has the governor met with short-term rental owners, and then what is it that they have expressed they want?
I have, and some of our surrogates have met a lot with them, like CNHA, who are working with us, and DHS, Department of Human Services. Some people are very willing to rent their units, and they were just trying to get to the new year when the bookings that they've had up for a long time were no longer a challenge. They didn't know if there was going to be a clear way for them to break their contracts and not pay a $5,000 fine. And so we've been working through that, so there's a lot of details. So I would say most people understand that we have to help those in Maui, and they've been appreciative of the fact that we're going to try to keep people whole, at least for this 2-year period. it's an opportunity for people to not worry about vacancies. They would be paid, monthly and be paid completely. I have had, and I just say this as a cautionary tale, I have had some people reach out and make many suggestions that they didn't want to rent to local people. And that made me very angry. Some people suggested that they didn't trust people would leave the units when the program was coming to an end. Some people didn't trust that when there were more local people who might have larger families, that they would treat the unit with respect. And that's not anything I've seen. I've seen people show great respect, even under circumstances when they've been traumatized. But we have had multiple individuals share that with us, or share with us insinuating comments that they shouldn't be forced to change their model, that that's their right to rent to whomever they choose. And I will just say this. We don't have enough housing in Hawaii. The short-term market is occupying tens of thousands of houses that we need to put into the workforce, working families like nurses and teachers, firefighters that live and work and help us through these crises. And so things have to change. And I'd like to change gradually, but if we have to shutter the system to get it going, I will. But to the earlier question that Bryce made, we'll still make it possible for people to not lose financially, because I don't want to end up in a wasteful set of legal hearings.
Thank you, Audrey. Final question here.
Hi, I've been on assignment in Paradise, California, following up the 5th anniversary there on a project specifically looking at exploitable lessons. And a lot of that was with CAL FIRE. And I was on a prescribed burn with staffed by nearly 100 people with CAL FIRE. The land fire protection law here obligates BMR to fire protection on our wildlands. That and mutual aid agreements put their responsibility up at about 60% of our land area. And obviously they're coming to respond to ag land fires. Their staff is fewer than 150 wildland firefighters. We have to bring in 2 interagency crews for Miliilani Mauka. Is the state looking at a state wildland fire service, volunteer wildland firefighting as CAL FIRE does? And really, really looking hard at tackling the management that needs to happen, domestication and prescribed burning with a new model.
Okay, so it's a very long question. Sorry for that awkward pause for those of you that are joining live stream. The question, just to simply put, is around, is the state looking at absorbing or implementing any best practices from CAL FIRE?
Thank you for the question. The answer is yes, we are. You'll see in the budget on Monday that we'll be requesting positions to do exactly that, to enhance our wildfire response capacity, and actually a lot of different mitigation efforts. We've already begun to do other things too. We've been cutting fire escape roads with the Department of Transportation. Excellent work from Ed Sniffen and his team. But yeah, we're taking in expertise from all over. One of the reasons that we tasked the Attorney General to do her investigation somewhat quickly is because we wanted the policy advice. And so we've had experts in both asking questions of the administrations, but also giving recommendations. So that will happen. I think that that's what you're going to really see as a focus from the work that the House has done, and also all of the input that will go into the budget. You'll actually be able to see the breakouts of our proposals, the numbers of positions, and the dollar numbers on Monday when we come for the next update.
And a follow-up with that, is the state taking responsibility for creating the seed banks that we need to follow management procedures?
Oh, sorry.
Behind that is that we do not have the seed banking to replant our ordinary native and endemic plants, and we're using more.
Okay, let me, instead of that being a speech, I'll do it as a question, okay? So, yes, so the question is, what are we contemplating as far as seed banks go and other foliage? And so, yes, the answer is that is part of what we're doing. What I'd like to do is to establish a climate mitigation fund, as we've talked about on several occasions, so that we have a steady source of revenue so that we can actually pay for all of these different plans. And I'm open to whatever recommendation the Speaker and the Senate President and their caucuses come up with to generate those dollars. We will have to change how we do land management in Maui, and maybe I'll move into kind of closing comments here. We have to change how we approach land management and support for DLNR. We do need a steady set of resources from the extreme number of travelers. I think that was clear. We just have to have the right mechanism, and it has to be balanced with the number of travelers. We'll have lots of different options for us to debate. There will be significant legislation that will be proposed by all of us to find a way through to limit the amount of damage that happens to our state as we recover. But let me summarize. Today, you've heard me talk about transitioning short-term rentals to long-term rentals. We need 3,000 units. So if you're listening today, please contact FEMA and the mayor's office and offer up those units if you've got them. You'll make it much easier on all of us if you do that. Number two, we are going to offer a $1.5 million per individual settlement, and I'll continue to take input to see if we can improve that or streamline that for those who might choose it, totally optional, if that suits their families, if they've lost a loved one or have been hurt. And then finally, we have a great new state representative. Thank you, guys.